Pia Cayetano, and to interpolate the distinguished Minority Floor Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the good sponsor will yield the floor for just a few clarificatory questions, Mr. President.
Gladly, Mr. President.
Well, as mentioned in the lounge by the Senate President, this is one of the so-called happy bills.
Yes.
And actually, if we succeed in doing this, Mr. President, we will modernize our communities and our local government units. That is the impression I get from reading the measure, Mr. President. May I know from the sponsor, because this will, I think, require a redesign of how our roads and streets, boulevards are constructed. If there is a government agency which is in charge of implementing this measure, should this become a law?
Mr. President, let me start by saying that yes, indeed, this is a happy bill, as the Senate President and the Minority Floor Leader have mentioned. And it's a happy bill, especially if we can ensure the proper implementation. Because as His Honor knows, and this addresses the question now in place, we already, well, most of our cities, especially those in the metropolitan areas, have long established their network of roads, no? May semblance of a main road and then may side roads. So in this bill, we recognize that in the creation of the Safe Pathways Network, which is a network of three particular pathways: bicycle lanes, walkways, and slow streets. In the creation of those, in the designation, because as I said, in existing cities, in metropolitan areas, especially municipalities, nandyan na yung kalye. So they will simply have to designate, not really create new streets. They will modify the use of the streets. That's how I'd like to put it, Your Honor. But so the LGU is primary here in redefining the use of these streets. It's the LGU with the community. The community has to participate. I'll give an example, Your Honor. And this is very common. Pag may patay po, lalo na yung style probinsya, kasi sa amin po sa Taguig, we call Taguig probinsiyudad. Pag may patay dun sa isang barangay, sinasara yung kalye, di ba? Madalas mangyari yun kasi maglalabas ng trapal sa labas ng bahay. Trapal, ano ba tawag doon? Tent? Lalabas sila ng tent. Pagkatapos, yung tent na yon sa nipis ng mga kalye, parang hinarangan niya na lahat ng ibang dadaan na sasakyan. Kaya effectively parang nasasara yung kalye. So that's almost like a slow street. So the LGUs will have to define this, Your Honor. But but the bill specifically says that traffic rules and regulations should be followed, and LGUs shall consult with DOTR. And of course, when it comes to national highways, then that's DOTR, Your Honor.
Yes, Mr. President, that is what I have noticed na this idea of the LGU doing things in consultation with the DOTR, and then sometimes in consultation with the DOTR and the DPWH is repeated numerous times in the measure, Mr. President. I'm just worried that because we are not pinpoint, in my opinion, we may not be pinpointing the government entity or level which is responsible for certain acts. Baka hindi po ma-implement ito ng mabuti. Yun lang po yung aking worry rito. Ano ba kailangan pa ba nating klaruhin ano yung sa LGU, ano yung sa DOTR, ano naman yung sa DPWH?
Well, actually, Your Honor, considering that this is a bill that we first introduced in the previous Congress, and we had numerous hearings and consultations with stakeholders, this representation on her own is really not an expert, no, on these matters, but we really had a very vibrant discussion with various stakeholders, and I can say that this final wordings that we have in our bill were agreed upon by various stakeholders. Now, I think that's a feat, Your Honor, considering that the interests of bikers may be very originally were very different from DOTR, because as we know, DOTR primarily is involved in motorized transport, parang mas ganun, ano? Pero I think the pandemic accelerated the acceptance and the need to be inclusive for other types of transportation, particularly active transportation. So, to repeat, and for the record, Your Honors, the general rule is that LGUs shall handle the Safe Pathway Network, and they will do this in consultation, well, for bike lanes, in consultation with DOTR and the Department of Public Works and Highways, for the reason that if the roads are under construction, to the extent that DOTR may have designated certain roads as major thoroughfares, they need to consult with these two agencies. And national roads, in particular in Metro Manila, the DOTR in coordination with DPWH, and we even mentioned here MMDA. And this is born out of necessity because some major thoroughfares like EDSA go through various cities in MMDA, in Metro Manila, and the MMDA somehow provides the guidance or the cohesive guidelines for all of these different LGUs, Your Honor.
For example, Mr. President, Section 11, sources of funding. The funds necessary for the implementation of this act shall be sourced from the amount set aside by LGUs for infrastructure projects within their jurisdiction, as well as from the appropriations of the DOTR and DPWH under the General Appropriations Act, and the Special Road Fund from the Motor Vehicle Users Charge as provided under Republic Act number 8794 as amended. Yun po yung tanong ko, yung paano po yung how will this work, Mr. President, yung appropriations of the DOTR and the DPWH under the GAA? Ibibigay po nila sa LGU?
The example I'll give, Your Honor, is actually in the budget for 2022, and I think maybe even 2021, again, because this was very, it's very hot, no? Very, it was a topic that was very much discussed, because remember we saw health workers using bicycles and even walking to the hospital or to their places of work. DOTR actually recognized this need, and if I'm not mistaken, Bayanihan 2 also included a budget for this. So DOTR then could, depending on the actual project, because there were projects that are defined under them, it's within their jurisdiction, they would use it, but but I will also add to that here, let me add to this. Specifically in November 2020, so this is the time of the pandemic, this is the pandemic budget for 2021, the DOTR secured 1.3 billion to fund the installation of a bike lane network in Metro Manila, Cebu, and Davao as part of its pandemic recovery plan. The budget was portioned was a portion of the 9.5 billion funding allotted by Congress to the DOTR under the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act. And then, the 2022 GAA gave 2 billion for active transport development. I can read this, no? The amount of 2 billion appropriated herein for active transport, bike share system, and safe pathways program in Metro Manila shall be used to construct, protect bike lanes, procure bike racks, improve end-of-trip cycling infrastructure, construct safe and accessible pedestrian pathways, and upgrade existing pop-up bike lanes into permanent bike lanes. So,
Sa
that's an
2022
example.
po yan? 2022.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, okay, so...
So I'd like to assure His Honor that mukha namang clear naman, at least for this major agency, DOTR, and I know MMDA was part of the discussions here, clear naman sa kanila yung mandate
Na-access
nila.
po, na-access ng LGU yung funding, bale?
Well, wala namang choice si DOTR but to implement that in the LGUs, right? As to whether they implement it themselves or give the fundings, I have to say that out na po ako doon. Hindi ko
Pwede
na
nating-
pinakailaman yon.
Pwede matanong during the
Pwede,
the budget
pwede.
hearings.
Yes,
Opo,
yes,
opo, how
Mr.
na-
President, we can do that.
Sige po. Sige po. Ang isa pong concern ko lang po dito, yung Section 6 on traffic laws, rules, and regulations. All users of non-motorized vehicles and electric personal mobility devices shall obey traffic laws, rules, and regulations and shall be subject to existing penalties for violation. Okay yung shall obey. I mean, syempre to have order even in the safe pathways network, we must have order. Pero will they be subject to penalties for violation
Yeah.
just by virtue of Section 6 and this phrase, the last part of Section 6?
Your Honor, our intention in the crafting of this particular provision is that we're not changing anything. Whatever existing traffic rules and regulations there are, we're simply saying that by opening up our streets to multi-use, and that includes bikers and other users of electric personal mobility, they will also be bound, and as His Honor says, tama naman yon. But if there are penalties, they should also be penalized. I'll give an example, Your Honor. As a biker, pag nag-traffic light, nagsistop din ako. Strict po ako dyan kasi takot na takot ako pagka merong hindi rin susunod na sasakyan, ako nakabike lang, di ba? Pero meron ding bikers, and the presiding officers knows that. May bikers na hindi sila susunod. Pagka tinuloy nila yun, pwede silang hulihin kasi stop nandun ka sa area na dapat stop, di ba? Yun lang naman po yung intention natin dito, na you're not exempt, you must also follow. If it is relevant to you. If it's not relevant, then it doesn't apply.
So the measure uses the phrase traffic laws, and we have found some laws which can qualify as traffic laws. So is the measure referring to the Land Transportation and Traffic Code, which is RA 4136, also the Anti-Distracted Driving Act, which is RA 10913, Anti-Drunk and Drugged Driving Act, which is RA 10586, seat belts use, hindi siguro.
Hindi na relevant.
I do not know. Maybe there may be
There might be
invented.
Exactly.
Yes,
That's true.
seat belts use act, RA 8750, Motorcycle Helmet Act, RA 154, and then Children's Safety on Motorcycles Act, RA 10666. These are just some of
Yes.
the laws which may qualify to be encompassed or referred to by the phrase traffic laws in Section 6, Mr. President. Am I correct in understanding that all of these laws will automatically be applicable?
To the extent relevant, Your Honor. That is our intention, to the extent that it is relevant. So like His Honor said, you mentioned seatbelt. So right away in my mind, bisikleta, seatbelt, parang wala naman.
Parang
But
wala.
then, because the person interpellating me, the minority floor leader, has a little child. How old? Two po, no? 2 years
Two
old.
and a half, yes, two and a
Helena
half
is
years
2.
old.
Naisip ko na on some bikes, you can put a child. And the child should also be wearing a helmet, should be in a, I've seen bikes with baby carriers, may seatbelt po yun. You know, so I could extend that by analogy, but really the idea here is to ensure that they follow the safety precautions that were put into place for their own protection, Your Honor.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. But therefore, this is actually a penal provision or section. So, because it will now subject them to existing penalties for violation, according to this paragraph 1 of Section 6. So,
Your Honor,
I think we follow our general rule that when we penalize, we better be
yes,
very specific
I
as
agree.
to the acts to be penalized, Mr. President.
Your Honor, to put on record, to be clear about this, if it does not clearly, if the act is not clearly defined as a crime, then we cannot punish them. That would be prejudicial, Your Honor, to the person, no, who's now accused of committing this act that is punishable. So we agree on that note, Mr. President. I think what I'd like to focus here is on the fact that we want them to follow these rules and regulations. And if they clearly fall within it, this law, this bill, which we hope will become a law, should not be used as an excuse not to comply if they fall within the purview of those laws. If they don't, then we are not creating a new penalty here, Your Honor.
So,
Or a new crime. We're not creating a new crime.
yes, Mr. President. So maybe we just be conscious of Section 6 when we finalize the measure, that if we really want to make the users of non-motorized vehicles and electric personal mobility devices subject to existing penalties, then my appeal is we follow our general rule. Diba? If we can
Yes, Your Honor.
specify what acts in the proper period, Mr. President.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Your Honor, offhand, this representation does not intend to define all these laws and specify new coverages. Perhaps in the period of amendment, and His Honor is more than welcome to make a proposal, but we will also study it and perhaps provide language that is clearer, such that the intention will be clear that this law does not exempt them from complying and being subject to the being penalized if they are covered by other laws. So
But
that
as of-
it's
yes,
not as if we're creating new crimes, Your Honor, or new acts that are penalized, Your Honor.
but as of just to clarify, Mr. President, as of the moment, for example, some of these laws, traffic laws that I have mentioned, do not cover them
Then they're not covered, Your Honor.
because they are non-motorized, for example. Because RA 4136 covers motor vehicles, so automatic
Yes.
automatic
so
na po yun.
non-motorized, hindi siya covered. Yes, Your Honor, hindi siya covered.
Yes, but may mga mahalagang ano dito, for order's sake. Andito si overtaking, andito si signaling, turning at intersections, andito si reckless driving, andito si obstruction of traffic, driving or parking on sidewalk, mga ganon ba? So parang applicable din dapat, but yun lang po yung aking caution. I don't think we can just by a phrase make traffic laws without specifying them, applicable to the users of non-motorized vehicles and electric personal mobility devices. But of course, if you want to have order, there must be some, di ba, consequence to
Yes, Your Honor.
disorderly
Yes.
or reckless behavior.
Well, if His Honor would prefer, we can delete the word laws and just refer to rules and regulations, so that those would be.
And anyway, Mr. President, we'll have time to study. I'm just
Yeah,
pointing
sure.
this out so that
Yes.
our attention will be called
Yes.
to Section 6.
And I will repeat, Your Honor, the intention here is as applicable. So there is no intention to be creative in the application. Kasi may penalty di ba? So ang ating interpretation should always be restrictive when there's a penalty. We cannot broaden that and say, sakop ka, therefore you'll be penalized. Just to be clear and to put on record, that is not the objective, Your Honor.
Yes. So thank you for that, Mr. President. And in my opinion, kasi if we say as applicable, then it's still as unclear as if we are not really pinpointing the acts, di ba? As applicable, so there's no guidance on the behavior of the person, Mr. President. But anyway, as I've stated, we have time to
Okay.
go
Yes,
over
Your
this
Honor.
and pursue this subject matter. One last one last point na lang po yung which part of the safe pathway is that where the pedestrians and possibly with baby strollers are allowed to mix with persons using electric personal mobility devices? Which one? Doon po yata sa walkway po yun?
Yes, dun po
Yes.
yun. Dun po yun.
Ay, yun lang po, yung nung nadaanan ko po ito, medyo nag-worry lang po ako kasi hindi ko ma-picture kasi sa future ano itong mga electric personal mobility devices na isabay natin sa may mga pedestrians, may mga parents dyan, na may mga strollers ng bata, baka po magkaroon ng collision, aksidente at makasama pa po.
Yes, Your Honor. This representation has taken time to visualize any possible mixed use and with safety always in mind. Again, because I'm a biker and I've also had the opportunity to bike or walk or run or walk while my children were using a scooter. They're not that small anymore. But with that in mind, we recognize that every LGU, every street would have different characteristics, and there really cannot be a one-size-fit-all here. So the general idea, Your Honor, is that there would be a separate walkway. So what we had hoped is that for areas that can accommodate a separate walkway and a separate bike lane and a separate motorized lane, and I showed a picture of a video actually of the roads in Korea, that would be ideal. And we even have such a road in Taguig along Lakeshore. Hiwalay ang sidewalk, elevated, and then there's a bike lane, and there's even an island separating it from the road. That's ideal. But we know for a fact that cannot happen in many existing cities and communities. And so we state that they may be shared, but this would be subject to LGU. So the LGUs may ban certain types of transport, whether ang ibaban niya is, alam niyo naman sa Pilipinas, lahat naman nilalakaran, pati nga national highway, tatawiran, bawal talaga yon, di ba? There's a reason why it's prohibited. It's not safe, di ba? And you're not also supposed to see a bicycle along NLEX and SLEX. Di pa naman yata ako nakakita, but I've had the privilege of biking on a portion of NLEX before it was officially inaugurated. Naiinggit ang presiding officer. Because before it was inaugurated, and then after that, you'll get an opportunity if there's a race. We can register for that, Your Honor. But otherwise, it's very important how that is characterized and designated by the LGU.
That's by the LGUs.
But let's be real, Your Honor. If you go to any side road, small road in the whole Philippines, multi-use naman talaga. We're already just putting some order here because right now it's most local roads are multi-use. May jeep, may personal vehicles, may tricycle, may bisikleta, may naglalakad, may pilay, may naka-wheelchair, lahat na, walang ano. So now, we want to try to put some order there, Your Honor, to the extent that we can.
Yes, and I think the important concept is safety. Kasi safe pathways yata ang concept
Your Honor,
nito. So,
yes. You're right, Your Honor.
Well, although this infrastructure may remain the same, behavior, the expected behavior is the behavior expected is radically different from what we have right now. Mr.
What is
President.
predominant right now.
Yes.
But if you go to Iloilo City, which I've had the pleasure of going, may we know from the presiding officer if he has bike there?
Yes, Iloilo has probably one of the nicest infrastructure right now. No? They have built-in bike lanes and pedestrian lanes that are really dedicated.
Yes. So it is possible to change outlooks, to change behavior. Sabi nga dun sa Field of Dreams, kung naaalala niyo po yung movie na yan, if you build it, they will come. So that's our hope, Your Honor. When I say build, I'm not just referring to infrastructure. I'm referring to building the system, building this network, creating those habits, changing the behavior. Then people will be able to adapt to that use.
Okay, so I hope LGU ordinances will be quick to react to the need, especially if this measure becomes a law. So, Mr. President, so I wish this measure all the best. If we pass this, I hope for its smooth implementation, wala nang turf war, walang pinpointing kung kanisinong may responsibility to do what. So one final point na lang siguro, Mr. President, so that we will be inspired. May we know from the sponsor, aside from South Korea, any other place, city, state, which we can
Visit?
research on or use as the model, the possible look and feel of the LGUs, of our LGUs when this becomes a law which is properly implemented, Mr. President.
Mr. President, my last official trip before COVID prevented travel was to visit a foundation in Denmark called the Happiness Institute. And I was pleasantly surprised because I've heard and I've seen with my own eyes in Amsterdam, very bikeable city. I'm told that is it in Amsterdam? I'll ask my staff to double check, but if it's in the Netherlands where the number of bikes outnumber the number of people, not the number of cars, outnumber people. So that's Amsterdam. And then when I went to Denmark, some of the sidewalks were exactly the same level as the streets. So I'm walking on the sidewalk. I will demonstrate. I'm walking on the sidewalks, and the bikes are really left and right beside me because I'm not even. I'm walking on the sidewalk, and I was saying that the bikes were beside me left and right because it's not elevated. And ito naman po, Your Honor, and ang pinaglalaban ng ibang active transport group na ayaw nga nila nung elevated walkways kasi papahirap pa daw sa tao yan. No, may point naman sila. I was in Singapore also. Part of active transport is there's a lot of elevated walkways para hindi pampahirap sa tao. May elevator and escalator options. So these are different ways that other countries and cities have adopted. My point in Denmark was that's how king of the road yung bikers. So sila pa yung mas nagme-may-ari ng daan. Same with Tokyo. In Tokyo, I recall I even saw underground parking for the bikes. Like you put in your card, your credit card, you put in your bike, it will go down. When you're finished working, you put it back. So actually, Mr. President, maraming bansa na ang nag-adopt. And if before, the non-availability of cars were viewed as, of motor vehicles were viewed as a sign of lack of development, it's the reverse now. The more non-motorized, the more active transport there is, the more it is a sign of development because they're letting people take over the road in that sense, Mr. President.
So thank you for that information, Mr. President. I'd like to thank our sponsor for the patience. I have been clarified, and I wish the sponsor all the best, and I'm looking forward to the smooth, proper, and successful implementation of this measure as law. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Minority Floor Leader.
Thank you. Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you to our distinguished minority leader and sponsor of the measure. Mr. President, there being no other members who wish to interpolate on the measure, I move that we